Steven Moffat, once one of Doctor Who's greatest writers, in the 2014 Doctor Who magazine poll he had 3 stories in the top 10. So why is he so hated by the fan community, myself included? His first writing credit for Doctor Who was the 1999 Red Nose Day special, The Curse of Fatal Death, starring Rowan Atkinson, Hugh Grant, Jim Broadbent, Richard E. Grant and Joanna Lumley as the Doctors. When the show returned in 2005, he had worked on another TV show, Coupling, which meant he had credibility to write for the new series. He then wrote The Empty Child / The Doctor Dances. This is seen as one of the best stories in Doctor Who history because of its bleak World War II setting, the creepy gas masked zombies, the very well thought out story, and of course the famous Everybody Lives ending. The next year he wrote The Girl in the Fireplace, which isn't as well received as his other RTD era stories, but is still considered a good story. Then the next year in series 3 he wrote Blink, which is seen as one of the best Doctor Who stories. It's a Doctor Light episode though, but it's so highly well received that it is actually number 8 on the IMDb list of top rated TV episodes of all time, above 10,000 votes. This story introduced us to the Weeping Angels, which are one of the show's more popular aliens just due to their sheer fear factor. I mean, I remember being a kid and being scared shitless of them. So then the next year he went on again to write a very creepy story, The Silence in the Library / The Forest of the Dead, which again was a very well received story. So in 2009, when Russell T Davies left his post as the showrunner for Doctor who better than Steven Moffat, who had written such consistently good stories? He cast Matt Smith as a Doctor, a completely unknown actor, and so people thought, will Moffat and Smith be able to capture the magic that Tennant and Davis had? When Series 5 came out, the answer was yes, Series 5 was a very well received series. And it was, fairly well thought out, though as great as the Pandorica Opens was, the Big Bang, which came after it in the finale, wasn't as great as its predecessor. He also wrote The 11th Hour, which was a great story for this. Time of Angels / Flesh and Stone, I think this is the wrong way around, I don't know. Which was, again, a well-received story, though it did show the Weeping Angels moving, which I didn't like. It took away the fear from them, as I see it. And he also wrote The Beast Below, which he admitted was a mistake and was his first fault as a writer for Doctor Who. The next year, with Series 6, was when he started to go downhill. He introduced Doctor Who to American audiences, which he is today praised for doing. But Doctor Who is a British show, and the Americans have never really properly understood the show. And I'm not calling Americans stupid or anything like that, it's just the Americanisation of Doctor Who has never really worked.
The Master. My brother.
But the first half of Series 6 was quite good. You had The Doctor's Wife in it, which was written by Neil Gaiman, of all people, all very famous writer. He was in The Simpsons. But The Impossible Astronaut / Day of the Moon was a very good story written by Moffat, and it was very open-ended, so you knew that the finale of the series was going to deal with what was going on, and it was a good story. Good Man Goes to War, Let's Kill Hitler they were good stories, not as great as other Moffat-written stories, but then he decided to have a split in the middle of the series, and why? Why did he split this series in half? I mean, it stated that he wanted to spread it out more, but everyone tunes in for the series. Having it split in half, just with mainstream audiences, was just confusing, and they didn't know when Doctor Who was... Every year consistently, from 2005 to 2010, Doctor Who started in April and ended in June, but having it start in April and end in May, and then start again in September and end in October, just didn't work. And viewing figures after this started to go down because the scheduling was messed up a lot more. But also in the second half of Series 6, he made what I think was the worst decision of a Doctor Who showrunner ever. Even the JNT stuff, I see this as worse. And that was getting rid of multi-part stories and declaring that every story should be a single part. With the RTD era, they were mostly single-part stories, but you had two-parters in there. And those cliffhangers were what made people tune in, because making them all single-part stories means that you tuned in, The Doctor turns up on an alien planet, looks around for a bit, finds there's some whatever going on, defeats the aliens, and 45 minutes later is back in the TARDIS and away happily. And then you're not really interested to tune in next week and see what happens. So having these single part stories, you could tell the viewing figures were starting to become a bit unstable around Series 7, which again had a split in the middle of it. This split was 6 months long, and people were very avidly against this. Moffat himself got rid of the splits in the middle of the series. Series 7 was a bit of a cock-up, basically. And then we get on to Clara. So, she was originally written as the impossible girl, The Doctor's come across several versions of her, exactly the same saying, and she dies each time, and so the mystery of who is she. And then it turns out at the end of the series that she went into the Doctor's timeline, and that's why there were several versions of her throughout the Doctor's history. And you were interested to know what the resolve of this mystery was. But then in Series 8, she didn't have this mystery around her, and the only character trait that was left was just arrogance, because she was just arrogant towards the Doctor. I mean, her arrogance with Matt Smith worked because he was also around the same age as her, so they could bounce off each other, but with Peter Capaldi, she just seemed to be rude to him all the time, and it was just, what? No. And she was hated because of this, and she started to take over the show. It didn't become the Doctor plus companion fighting monsters. It became Clara and the Doctor doing Clara things. I mean, many of the stories were just what Clara wanted to do, and she wasn't even like popular enough to get to that status. She was just thrown in there by Moffat. I think behind the scenes, Jenna Coleman started to become a much more prominent figure than even Peter Capaldi, because she was written out at the end of Series 8 and should have ended then. You just have a dodgy companion for a series, you move on. And she was given a good send-off, but then in Last Christmas, she comes back. Don't know why, but she was written out of Last Christmas. She was given a ending where she's, aged a lot, but the Doctor doesn't see age and moves on. But then it turns out it's all a dream, which totally messed up with the narrative of Last Christmas, and is why it's a poorly received story. It was a good story up to that point. It wasn't good, it was decent. But then that ending just threw it out the window. And then Clara comes back for Series 9, and she did not need to be there. She was just thrown into Series 9. She was toned down a lot from Series 8, but still just didn't need to be there. But then she died and faced a Raven, and it was like, oh, thank God she's finally gone. Because by this point she had already had a serial run due to this single episode stories. She had a serial run that was greater than many of the Doctors. In fact, when she finally left, she had, and I'd have to check the exact numbers on this, she had around about as many stories to her name as Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann and Christopher Eccleston combined. And she became a companion as prolific as many of the Doctors, yet she wasn't popular. She was hated by the fan community. I've skipped over a lot with this whole Clara thing. I'm going to go back a step. So in 2013 we had the 50th anniversary, and the BBC put everything out there for it. I mean, you had the Day of the Doctor, which was a multi-Doctor story. We were introduced to a new Doctor in John Hurt's The War Doctor. We had Paul McGann returning on screen for the second time ever. We had the revelation that 9 missing episodes had been found. We had the documentary An Adventure in Space and Time. This really was a peak period for Doctor Who. And the viewing figures showed it. Day of the Doctor garnered 12 million views, not accounting for the fully booked cinemas around the country, around the world. In fact, it was broadcast around the entire world at the same time. In the UK, it garnered, I think, 12.8 million views. But that wasn't including the mainstream fans like myself who had seen it at the cinema. If you counted those people, it was probably knocking on 20, I'd imagine. And then the time of the Doctor came along, and Moffat, it goes on to this because Matt Smith was the last Doctor in the chronology. He had used up his 12 regenerations, So of course, Steven Moffat's going to make a story about how he manages to get a new regenerative cycle, or not. He just has a lot of loose ends from Smith's era and wraps them all up in a single story, and then just happens to have, oh yeah, the Doctor gets some regenerative energy just before he regenerates so he can destroy some Daleks and move on. It's like, this is something that was first brought up in 1976 in The Deadly Assassin, and so people have been waiting for this for so long, but it was just circumvented. I'd imagine in many years' time a writer would go back to that and give an actual how the Doctor got more regenerations, because it was just completely blown over by the time of the Doctor. So then, I've said about Series 8, Clara was just overpowering through it, and Series 9 she gets killed off, and then you have Heaven Sent. Again, one of the best stories in Doctor Who history, and the Doctor is mourning the death of Clara, and it's a really, really well written story. And then the Doctor you know what? Nothing happens. He breaks through that wall, and then he's in the TARDIS. Nothing happens after that. Heaven Sent was the last episode of Series 9. In my mind. If you want to know more about Hellbent. Sorry, I couldn't even say its name there. Hellbent. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to make this video a Hellbent rant. I'm just going to put either on the screen or in the description, I don't know, some links to other videos which I've seen other Doctor Who fans make where they've gone on about Heaven Sent. Just watch those. You'll know exactly what's wrong with Heaven Sent, because I can't even talk about it without going... I mean, I've probably already spoken about it for about 2 minutes. So then Moffat decided to have an 18-month hiatus. Not hiatus, break. He wanted to wait 18 months between series. Why? Why are you having an 18... In 1986, an 18-month hiatus made the whole fandom blow up. You had Doctor in distress, you had people writing into the BBC, the viewership dropped down so much, the viewership actually halved due to an 18-month hiatus in 1986. And then Moffat thinks, you know what will get viewership back up? An 18-month hiatus, which was just stupid. Did he actually think that people would tune in because there's been an 18-month hiatus? And you can see what happened with Sherlock. It's 2 years between each series and only 3 episodes a series. So when the series comes back, there's a lot of hype for it, and he was trying to replicate that. But with Doctor Who, that isn't how it works. Doctor Who is supposed to be consistent, you can rely on it, it's getting broadcast when it does. But then this fucking 18-month hiatus. I'm calling it a hiatus, it wasn't even that. It was a showrunner choosing to mess up the broadcasting scheduling, and in that we had Class, why that got commissioned. And talking about commissions, let's go back to Series 8 for a moment. Kill the Moon and In the Forest of the Night. In the Forest of the Night I'm not even going to talk about. That's a whole video in itself, In the Forest of the Night. Kill the Moon was just such a stupid story. I mean, I don't mean it was just poorly written or something like that. It clearly did not have an understanding of anything in Doctor Who, or anything in science, or anything in basic human logic. And when Moffat got that script, why he didn't just throw it back at whoever wrote its face and said, this is just terrible, go away and burn it, I don't know. He commissioned this story, which frankly is so stupid, it's now debated whether it's actually canon or not. It's that bad. People don't consider it canon, it's that bad. In the Forest of the Night, people just overlook. Didn't happen. But then we get on to Series 10, and Series 10 was a strong series. And then, again, Moffat had World Enough in Time. You see the Cybermen like you've never seen them before, how the Cybermen should be. You see a companion getting turned into a Cyberman. An idea which was just, impossible to get wrong. A companion has been turned into a Cyberman. Never happened before in Doctor Who. And we've got 2 Masters on screen for the first time in the show's history, the first multi-master story. So the World Enough in Time was the best single parter. I'd say it's the best single parter in the show's history, in Modern Who. Trying to think if there any better one. No, I'm gonna say World Enough in Time was the best first parter in Modern Who history. And then the Doctor Falls happens, and the Doctor Falls was not a bad story. I'm gonna say that now. Doctor Falls was not bad, but the Masters are wasted. You've got 2 Masters together, and they just stand around talking. It doesn't even affect the story, and then at the end they just shoot each other for no apparent reason. They just do it. And if you want to hear my theory about this, you can go to this video, my most popular video, but that's just me pushing my own videos, where you've got the Doctor about to regenerate. It's very good. I mean, they've got some stupid bits in it, like those people in the farm that you don't care about. But then you've got Bill, the first companion to be a Cyberman. And then Heather turns up and makes her normal again. Well, hey! Why? Why? Why did this happen? It'd have been much better to have seen her and Heather go off, her still a Cyberman, but Heather can look over it. That would have made a good ending. That I'd have been fine with. But no, she's got to turn back to normal. No! She is a Cyberman now. That's how it ended. But nope, the Doctor just moves on into Twice Upon a Time. And Twice Upon a Time, people would say, this is a multi-Doctor story, 10 out of 10. What they did to William Hartnell's legacy was disgusting. What they did is they said, we're getting a female Doctor now, let's show how progressive we are by making a reflection between the first Doctor, who was a white elderly male in the 60s, so therefore was a sexist, and we're now getting a female Doctor. So we've progressed, we're a progressive show. Let's overlook the fact that that Doctor Who's first producer was the first female producer in the BBC. Let's overlook that fact that Doctor Who's always been progressive, and let's make the first Doctor out to be a sexist. You know, let's go through his run and find some lines that can be taken out of context, like "You deserve you deserve a jolly good smack bottom." Let's just insert that in there, completely out of nowhere. Let's just have the Doctor say it to Bill for no reason, and let's just. Well, hey, we're progressive. That line is taken way out of context. He said it to his granddaughter in the story where then later he decides that she's actually a grown-up woman and gives the best performance in the One Day I Shall Come Back speech in Doctor Who history. And they just defecate on that for the sake of let's be progressive now. And it was an impossible to ruin the story. The Doctor's about to regenerate and he doesn't want to. But then he comes across his first regeneration about to regenerate and doesn't want to. And, you know, simple story. The Doctor helps him through the regenerative process and says it's going to be alright. And then the first Doctor comes to accept this and regenerates. And then the 12th Doctor, in doing that, comes to accept his regeneration and becomes the 13th. But no, the first Doctor's just there as a joke on Doctor Who's history. And people will see this and think, oh yeah, Doctor Who in the 60s, that was a sexist lot. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And that's what Twice Upon a Time made out. And this was basically Moffat leaving by defecating in the room. And he just, you know, took a big old shit and then was like, bye-bye, I'm going, and left. And that's what Twice Upon a Time was. You know, it's things like this he did across this entire history. He did it a lot in Hellbent. I'm not going to talk about it. Watch those videos. He did it a lot in Hellbent. But bringing back Clara in Hellbent and bringing back Bill in The Doctor Falls was just Moffat's Everybody Lives. He did it great in his earlier stories, but this became so repetitive. You can't kill off a companion, he says. No, the Doctor's supposed to be an optimistic show. It's supposed to be about how the Doctor can do right. You can't have people die, is what Steven Moffat says. The best Doctor Who stories in the classic era: Genesis of the Daleks, everybody dies. Caves of Androzani, everybody dies. Pyramids of Mars, everybody dies. Evil of the Daleks, everybody dies. Power of the Daleks, everybody dies. Vengeance on Varus is very dark. Revelation, Resurrection, Remembrance of the Daleks, everybody dies. Not even Remembrance, but everybody dies in Resurrection. Resurrection has a death count twice out of the Terminator. Doctor Who's got a lot of death in it, and that's what gives it gravitas. But Moffat takes the concept of death out of Doctor Who. He actually does that. And these are just things. This is why Moffat is hated by the fan community. People were saying he should have left it around the 50th anniversary in 2013, because Series 7 he started to slip a lot, but he just kept going because people were saying 2013 he should go. He was still going on in 2017. He went on 4 years longer than people wanted him to, and he just kept going and going and going, and now he's going. And, you know, to be fair to him, he's written during his run on the show, he wrote the best stories: Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Doctor, Listen. he stood out in his own era. But his was great at individual story writing, but show running, he was terrible. He could not do a series. But he was a good writer. He was a great writer. He wrote some of the show's best stories. And so that's what makes him controversial. He wrote great stories, but he handled the show so terribly. And that's basically Moffat. Moffat's era is going to be looked back on as both great because of its individual stories, but terrible because of how it was handled. And that's what makes Moffat the most controversial figure in Doctor Who history.